Good evening and welcome to AioT Hub. I'm Paul Wealls. I'm along here with John Staveley, my good friend and colleague for the AioT Hub. We're joined by an absolutely exceptional crowd for our roundtable this evening, discussing the adoption of AI, IoT, edge computing in UK manufacturing. We've got the phenomenal Leeder with us. We've got Dolo from Linebreak. We have Ben Faroydye from Lenovo, and Professor Rajiv Ranjan from Newcastle University, and also the director for the National Edge AI Hub, spearheaded from Newcastle University. Good evening, everybody. How are you doing?
Very well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Good.
Thank you.
We'll jump straight into actually, let's do a bit of introductions. Ben, fire away, quick intro on yourself there, my friend.
Hi, everyone. Ben Faroydye, working for Lenovo, and effectively have worked with software companies, specialist companies that help manufacturers extract and gain value out of their data. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. And over to Nick.
Hi, I'm Nick Leeder, from the founder of Nick Leeder & Co. I've spent about 30 years at the coalface of transforming manufacturing and engineering across companies around the world, including companies like SKF Group and Dyson.
Excellent. Great to have you on with us tonight, Nick. And Dolo from Linebreak.
Hi everyone. My name's Dolo. I'm the CEO of Linebreak. We're basically helping enterprises of all sizes and industries, including manufacturing, become real-time automation with AI in the edge to transform the way they manufacture and control their assets.
Absolutely brilliant to have you on again with us. It was great to have you last month as well. Rajiv.
Thanks, Paul. So I'm Rajiv Ranjan. I'm professor at Newcastle University, also the national director for UK AioT Hub, which is a consortium of 15 UK universities and 80 companies. And a lot of those companies, they are working with Hub on smart manufacturing. And thanks, Paul, for inviting me.
Absolute pleasure. And of course, we've got John online with us today. I had to make you uncomfortable at some point, John. How are you doing?
Great, Paul. Thanks. Thanks for the introduction. I've been doing lots of triathlons. I've got some new medals here. You may notice I've done 5 triathlons this year. It's been quite exciting, and I've achieved my objective of doing an Olympic distance one, which is 3 hours of very, very intense cardio. It's quite exciting. So my day job is I'm a software engineer with a specialism in IoT. And recently I've been reading this book on artificial intelligence for IoT, which covers all aspects of AI in IoT with some great worked examples, which I thoroughly recommend.
There is another book out, this one, written by me, called The Human Loop, which was perfectly timed on your mentioning of books there, that if you can order searching Paul Wealls on amazon.co.uk or wherever you are. And sorry, I couldn't resist that. It was too much of an opportunity. Thanks for that, John. Okay, let's jump on to the questions. We are seeing huge growth and excitement around artificial intelligence, and in turn that drives around the opportunity with edge computing, IoT. But we've got a few things that we need to think about on how we drive that adoption. And funny enough, I do talk about this in the book, The Human Loop, and about the human side of things. So first of all, bridging old and new. Nick, how can manufacturers successfully integrate AI and edge computing with existing OT and legacy systems without causing disruption or resistance from the teams that manage them?
Great question. And by the way, I love the way that it blurred out the book title as you there was something we shouldn't be seeing there. There was something pretty dodgy. Great question. And thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. Well, let's start with the basics. I think it's about focusing on where the value is. And it sounds so simple, but I see it missed so often because we get focused and excited about what the technology can actually do. So focusing on where the P&L is hurting, that's going to be where we've got to start with this journey. Picking one pain that actually could be solved by some of the technology and get a payback quickly within a quarter. We're not talking about 3-year projects anymore. So, good targets, things like scrap on high volume products or energy per unit on energy hungry cells, for example, or early fault detection in bottleneck machines. Using the technology, get very tangible, quick results. I think another point, and I've got 5 points, so I'm in number 2 now. Let's think about the technology that we don't have to replace everything. We've got to be able to wrap that around and what you have today, and not rip out the technology that you have. So, put these devices, the edge devices, for example, in front of PLCs and the historians to read the data, but don't touch the control logics that are there already. It kind of de-risks, but allows you to move forward a lot faster and keep the familiar. So try and keep the operator screens, try and keep the SOPs as they are today, and then use these tools of edge and AI on top of it to create more digital overlays, more insights that you might have, but not replace what you have. That reduces the change resistance quite significantly.
Mm-hmm.
And again, do those changes when you have planned downtime. Don't try and do it on the fly. Really find the spot. The next point, I think, is another one, and I'm sure we're going to come on to this a lot more in the conversation today, is technology is not a technology game. It's actually a people game. So when we're thinking about these changes, and combining old and new, put the people, the frontline people, not the IT people or the managers, but the people who use the technology in the center of what you're doing. So, involve the maintenance technicians or the control engineers from day one of these projects, and let them choose how this works, the technology works together. I use this phrase a lot as well, is find your Yoda. And I think we all know Yoda from Star Wars, and, the wise person that every Jedi, everybody listens to and understands. So, get your respective operator, find your Yoda that everybody listens to, give them time and get them to become your champion. I mean, that is, for me, one of the best ways of accelerating people using that and driving the adoption of the business. The fourth point is security. And when we hear about cybersecurity, and we can't help but notice in recent weeks the catastrophic issues that we've had in UK manufacturing due to cybersecurity failures, who obviously for many legal reasons shall remain nameless right now, but I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. So, design this to be secure from the beginning. Think about these things. Make sure you've got a blast radius so that when you're doing it, you're proving it, you're not going to take everything down. And then the final point I want to make around this old and new scenario is, now you're getting the data off. You're able to think about that data and make it available across the business. So make the data travel more than just within manufacturing. So think about how that same data can service finance, general reporting, but making sure that you're using standardized name tags and context at source, so that when you're using that data, it makes sense to everybody and everything. And that starts allowing you to create a joined up story and also a joined up proof of value. And that goes back all the way back, almost circular, to the first point, which is starting where the pain is today.
That's excellent. Dolo, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, Nick's just stole all of my thunder, but no, seriously, I think, yeah, absolutely. Loads of stuff resonates here in terms of the old and the new. So just a couple of examples, anonymous examples, but from folks that I've been talking to and with about their challenge. We know that manufacturing is basically a lean operation, right? So it's not that there's obvious large amounts of waste that you can just take out. And what I mean by that is the machinery, the assets that have been put in place. I mean, these have life cycles of years, even decades. Some people I've been talking to. So the trick, as Nick says, is to start putting technology alongside what you're trying to improve, rather than this kind of blue sky thinking where the grand vision is to rip out everything, and then you look at the cost of doing that. The business case doesn't stack up. This is something that I've seen a number of times, and it's about unlocking the data, as Nick said as well. So can we do something which will be incrementally creating the ability to unlock data without requiring you to, you'll need an entire new assembly line, whole new technology, not just technology, but mechanics as well. I mean, that's just not feasible. So the way that we've been approaching it is exactly that. What kind of ways can we put technology along the side? The idea of wrap not rip, Nick, that you mentioned, is in the IT world, right, where I spent a long time in systems integration, in transforming application portfolios for complex enterprises. The idea of wrap and replace was an idea from the IT world. And I think in the OT world, it's wrapping with technology alongside, as opposed to ripping out installed capacity that you've had, machines that you've had in place for years, and you've still got the depreciation and amortization of that asset to go, so you can't replace it. So I think that resonates very, very strongly with me, and so that's where we've been focusing actually in terms of around the technology. Is the old is not bad. You've got stuff that works. How can we improve on that? So we've been looking specifically at technologies that will basically sit alongside, and then you can trial it. If you have something that is a small piece of compute, maybe, because that's what you're going to need ultimately. If you want to do better insights with the data that you have, if you want to be able to make faster decisions, that will require compute. Where's that compute? Does it already exist within your estate? So some of the technology providers that we're working with are saying, well, it's a software-defined world. If you've got some compute somewhere, we can put our software on your existing assets, or it's a small amount of compute per site, which you can then trial. So I think having something that ultimately, once you prove the value, you can scale out, but it doesn't require this big risky approach of taking out tried and trusted assets and machinery that work. I think it's part of getting the buy-in to do something like this. And going back to the downtime part, the security and downtime go together. I mean, obviously, as you said, Nick, we've seen the news, not just manufacturing. So many sectors have been impacted massively by cybersecurity issues, and the downtime it causes is phenomenal for manufacturers. We know the cost of downtime from various reports. So the idea for that, like you said, you have to build in resilience and security as part of what you're proposing from the beginning. But again, starting small and putting things alongside the assets are a key thing. There are a few other things that Nick's mentioned. I'm going to stop here because I'm going to come to a bit later on, which is absolutely about the people, Nick. But I'll come to that maybe in a section around culture later on.
Excellent, thank you, Raj. I think that's a good sort of segue into the work that yourself and the Hub are doing, and the launch tomorrow, right, with the AI Safety Centre. What's your experience have been, and what are your hopes with the Hub on how to help those challenge statements?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I fully agree with what Dolo and Nick said. I think one of the points I would like to add, based on our experience with working with companies, is the main challenge is interoperability. For example, we don't want to replace the existing OT systems, or you don't want to replace the existing human in the loop. But what you want to do is you want to interface the legacy system with the new AI component. And the approaches that we have been building in AI Hub is based on how can we build data wrappers, external APIs, external middleware services that can speak in a seamless way to legacy PLC systems, SCADA systems, without the need of ripping and replacing the existing hardware. So one of the key challenges in this kind of system is how can the hardware and the software and the AI components can coexist together, and that's where Hub can help. So that's what our focus has been till now. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for that. So moving on to sort of the next stage of questioning here in regards to removing the ego. So Ben, In many organizations, ego and departmental ownership can slow adoption. What strategies can leaders use to take ego out of the room and create a shared vision where IT, OT, and business units pull in the same direction?
Well, the key thing here is to create a culture that is a shared, it's a shared success as a goal, not departments, so to speak. And I'd say probably three key things that we've seen, and this is from going to workshops and working with some of our software partners, effectively unified KPIs, aligning IT and OT teams together, around common outcomes, whether it's uptime, quality, or customer satisfaction. I think previously some of the colleagues that have already mentioned that, cross-functional squads of people taking your shop floor team, absolutely critical to any pilot or anything that takes place. So creating that sort of like team of members with a real shared ownership. And another thing that we've seen from the workshops, and this is feedback from some of the customers, is, celebrate some of that, that collaboration across the teams to show that people have, the value of actually working and collaborating together. And the last thing is that, and this is from some of those leaders themselves, they say lead with humility. They must model the behavior that they want the sort of like the rest of the cross-functional teams to see, and they want to credit others and take everyone on that journey. I think it's been mentioned that with regards to IT and OT and bringing new technology in, we have where we sit, it's layered technology, layered architecture, which doesn't disrupt the operation. So all those gateways and APIs become quite critical, but it's creating that common culture and actually recognizing that it's cross-functional teams, probably similar to the time when DevOps and IT sort of like started to operate, bring in the right to share that common goal.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, and I think one of the things that I've observed on projects that I've worked on over the past decade or so is there's sort of two moments of ego. There's the ego of wanting to be ambitious and move ahead and trying to run ahead from the competition to try and be the person that knows how to execute. And then there's the flip side of that other side, the other people that are being a lot more pragmatic, very slow, protectionism, and a bit fearful of the evolution, that then are the naysayers that throw in the friction points, which quite often stalls. And in fact, with edge computing that I've experienced over the past 10 years, the ones that have actually been more successful are the ones that are the naysayers and the friction points, because in manufacturing, very risk adverse, right, Nick? Have you witnessed that too?
Absolutely. I use this phrase that there's no fashion in manufacturing. And there's a reason why we still use PLCs that date from the 1990s, and we don't change them every 2 years as the new technology comes along, because things work. And we don't like things not working in manufacturing because there's a consequence to it. And I think the naysayer piece there is really, really important, because it drives everything down to a practical level. I think one of the other challenges I think, Paul, that I see a lot, and I'm working with a guy called John Robinson, who is launching the quorum principle at the moment and is getting a lot of traction in the manufacturing sector, is that the different stakeholders are involved have all different goals. You look at the IT team, they have their goals. You look at OT team, they have their goals. The strategy and the exec people will have their own goals, and the business improvement people will have their own goals. But nobody's speaking a common language, and there is no clear view of what you're trying to achieve. Let's call that the why. Mm-hmm. And I think until you get a why that everybody shares that common goal and works towards it, and by the way, behind those internal silos, you've also got different suppliers as well, that adds to that complex landscape. Until you get that shared why, you still got everybody's ego at play and actually pulling against often different measures. An OEE measure that is operational KPI doesn't actually have a financial meaning to the CFO, for example, So a 10% OEE, what does that really mean financially? And you've got to convert these metrics, for example, into something that everybody understands and everybody works towards. And I think, Ben was making that point, is once you have a common why and you have a common goal and a common language that everybody understands the outcome they're driving towards, I tend to see those egos come down because we're all working towards the same outcome.
No, I was just about to pass it to you, John. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a software engineer, and the most successful projects I work on, when you're not actually part of the on-site team, is one where you have a local champion who's dealing with the culture, who's dealing with the politics, and really sort of waving the banner for the change that you're proposing with IT. Now, that kind of sounds like you need a bit of ego on site because the champion is it's carrying the project through and pushing through the human resistance to get the projects live.
As long as it's not the champion's ego that is driving it, but actually driving to helping corral people towards the goal. Because otherwise it becomes their project and their ability to be the champion actually gets diminished, does it not?
Yeah. Because what I've noticed is when the champion leaves, that kills the project. Because you've got the great main cheerleader for it disappears, and the voice for its benefits, and the real energy behind it. And that's when I've seen projects fail without a champion on site.
Yeah, I have actually experienced that too. Is that sometimes when things are in the stage of especially POC and moving across beyond POC, which is where you generally find that a lot of friction, is when the other counterparts are brought in on the decision maker for being brought in. That if that sort of endorser, thought leader, disappears from the company and moves on or moves into a different role, that then it kind of crumbles away.
I mean, I think the thing about ego is absolutely we've all come across this, I'm sure. But I think there's another piece, which is it manifests as ego-like. But there is, whoever said earlier that essentially we've got an environment that's quite highly stressed. Things need to work. If they don't work, it's a serious consequence. I think Nick said it earlier. And these folks are highly expert. Many of them have been in that environment and seen and cope with the stresses and strains over many, many years. They know the intricacies. And so the challenge becomes that here am I, some new guy. I'm not an expert. I'm not a deep expert in manufacturing. I will never claim to be that. What I say is I'm an expert in being able to understand problems, whichever domain it might be, including manufacturing, and then help understand what solutions might exist to be able to address that problem. It's a technology-oriented solution in my case, but that is part of the resistance, right? That what looks like ego is when folks are too fast to go, I have the answer. Like, for example, today, and I'll definitely expand on this later on as well, is AI is the answer. What's your problem? It's like this doesn't work for folks who are very operationally minded. It's like you don't get my environment. So we have to take the time to listen, to bring those stakeholders together who are the actual experts in the room. I'm not an expert. I'm a bit of a technological kind of nerd, maybe, let's say, who kind of gets technology, but I don't understand necessarily manufacturing or utilities or whatever industry you might have. But I've got 2 ears and one mouth, the old phrase. And what I want to do first is really understand your problem or get you to articulate your problem. And then, of course, you do have internally within organizations, different departments, different functions have their own KPIs, their own goals. And that is part of, as Nick was explaining, you're trying to get that common vision, right? So there is, again, I spent 30 years in technology enabled business transformation, so that's the point. It's enabled by rather than is the transformation. It's a business transformation we're looking at. And that is about people, process, and technology. People first, the process. What do they want? Why have they got a problem? How can they resolve that? And with what can we solve it? The technology is the last part that comes in. So if we listen, and I think that's part of it, is get the group to listen. And I had a really interesting experience about a year and a half ago now, in over on the East Coast, a global manufacturer. And the only way we could actually get this new supply chain idea to fly in terms of getting those egos out of the room was getting everybody together. We flew people from China, from different parts of the US. I came from Europe, to just get in the same space. And that's how you can try and, there's a human thing going on here, right? You get to build relationships with each other, you understand each other's points of view a little bit more. There's a bit of empathy going around. And I think that human condition is part of what you use to essentially break down the sort of ego barriers.
Yeah, Raj, what's your thoughts on this subject?
I think one of the thing I would like to say about this removing the ego is, we have to create cross-domain champions. So we have to, create two teams like a matrix, and we have champions on both the sides. And whenever we have a success because of application of edge computing and AI, we need to reward and recognize both the domain experts and as well as the data scientists. I think when we value the existing operators, existing people working on the floor, then only the ego will be eliminated from the whole system, and adaptation of AI and IoT and edge computing will be more streamlined. I think that's what I wanted to emphasize.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So moving, yep, sure.
I'll just say that there's a great book called The Chimp Paradox.
Oh yeah.
I think this is understanding everybody's inner chimp, your own chimp, and how the brain works, and this is where the ego comes in. And I think we all actually have a responsibility not to just look at what's motivating us, which drives our own ego, but also what's driving everybody else's agendas. And if you understand them and their agendas and them as individuals, I think that is also another major component that really would help drive that. And that's fundamental cultural components as well. So people need to feel safe in these environments to do that.
Yeah, that's a really good call. I forgot about that book. Now I could have used that as a reference. It's one of my favorite books that I've read over the past 15 years, actually. Very, very insightful. And it's one of those moments when you're reading it where you have those aha moments of your own behaviors, but also others around you. And it kind of does set on the premise of the human loop in what I'm trying to articulate there about sort of getting on the same wavelength of other people to move forward together rather than trying to pull or push or just go like the lone soldier. Raj, shared language and understanding. How do we create a common language between AI, edge innovators, and traditional manufacturing teams so that both feel valued, heard, and invested in the transformation? Sort of building on the discussion that we've just had here in regards to the ego.
Yeah, I think so. I like to make 4 points. I think the first point to build a shared environment of innovation based on edge and IoT will be, talk about impact and outcome, not talk about core AI systems, algorithms. For example, talk about how AI can improve the safety of the workers on the floor, how AI can avoid the cybersecurity attacks on the system that we saw in the Jaguar Land Rover case. Also talk about how AI can improve the predictive maintenance so that it can improve the revenue of the companies. So that way, people will appreciate the application and adoption of this new kind of technologies. I think other thing I would like to point out is AI and edge computing is quite complex, and mostly when we adopt this kind of technology, you are dealing with systems of systems. So obviously you are collecting data on the edge, on the machines, but that data actually goes to the cloud where you process using different kind of AI models. So it can become really, really difficult for people to understand this data flow and the workflow and how AI algorithms are functioning. So yeah, I think we need to look into in the manufacturing sector, especially where we need to bridge in operators and data scientists together, build nice dashboards, digital twins, and pilot demos, so that everyone can understand and appreciate how technology can actually make their everyday work safer, efficient, and increase the revenue of their company. The third point I'd like to make is, treat AI engineers as problem solvers and operators as domain experts, and tell both of them that this AI adoption or edge computing adoption is not going to happen if these two teams don't work together, and if, as I said before, if their champions don't collaborate together. I think, and try to highlight that working together is the only way out to improve the safety and optimization of manufacturing across any sectors. And obviously, the fourth point I would like to say that, when you have AI scientists, data scientists, take them to factory floors and actually show them the complexity of the physical environment. Ultimately, wherever you apply AI, it's going to be cyber physical system, right? Cyber is a digital component where you run your AI model like cloud or edge, but there's a physical element, right? You have to take them to the manufacturing plant and show them the complexity so that they can appreciate the whole ecosystem when they are training, deploying, and safeguarding the AI models. So I think these are the 4 points I wanted to make.
I think one of the things that resonates with me, and I had a catch up with Nick a couple of weeks ago on a call, and there's a great organisation and training opportunity happening being led by the Northeast Combined Authority, Nissan and Vantec, which is made Northeast. And I was on their site a couple of weeks ago, and they're putting in a full production line, and it's demonstrating the transition from dumb to smart and taking businesses through that training. And I think I got really enthused by it because it was one of the first times I've actually seen a really great environment of with people with experience of how they've adopted that technology. And one of the conversations we actually had was, there is the technology side of things of how they're implementing, but actually isn't there the adoption and business side of things to build out as a training opportunity as well. I think some of the things that you've touched on there from the hub, Raj, in fact, you were in that meeting with me, weren't you? There is an opportunity for collaboration with the university on those points as well. That on some of the projects that I've worked on, well, most of the projects I've worked on over the years in manufacturing, the sand pit was literally a table across the way from the production line. And it was a little bit scrappy. That we're having that kind of environment where it is a full production line, showing how the data comes into play and stuff, then it enables that creativity of the operational people on the floor can experience it and understand to drive that adoption, and makes it that softer approach.
I mean, I think just on that point about shared language and understanding, it really touches on common points we've already kind of covered a little bit, but the shared language is for me, again, it's not about the deep tech side of things and getting all technical. It is, as you say, business language, or the language of the operator. I remember quite a few projects I've been involved in over the years. The barrier for me has been to just understand the language that they're using and what they mean by the different acronyms and everything else. And but I'd rather understand the business language or the operator's language rather than get them to understand what new tech and how it works and what the details of the different acronyms we have in technology are. So it's about creating a business language. Let's call it plain English, or in that sense, to really demystify, if you like, what we're trying to do. And the shared understanding absolutely is that core part, again, back to ego and people and creating teams. A shared understanding of what we could achieve here, or what we're trying to achieve, and get a common, essentially, value or a common vision that we can all then feel like we're pulling in the same direction. And I think that it goes back to the outcomes, as Rajiv said. If we give an example around, for example, predictive maintenance, which is a huge opportunity in manufacturing to solve with edge AI in particular. So being able to talk about not necessarily edge AI, but the idea that you have downtime and use the language of the impact of downtime, the cost of that, the upstream effect on the customer. In fact, that reminds me of literally a conversation I had within the last month, which is, it's serving your stakeholders internally is one thing, but what does it mean to the customer? Often that's a shared value that everybody has, which is, how can I make the lives of my customer better, how can they see my company as a trusted brand that they will come back to? And I'm proud to work for this company because we're the best at serving our customers. And so we've been looking at our customers' customer, for want of a better term, a way of getting a shared understanding in terms of what's the impact that we're trying to achieve here.
Like sort of like outcome based, outcome focused, right?
Right. Yeah.
Solving the problem. Anybody else? Any other notes on that question, Nick?
I mean, my experience of software projects is you go to a customer and you deliver something, and it's like it was a really hard problem for them, and suddenly you've made their life a whole lot easier. And for compliance reasons, they had to get it right, or bottom line reasons, they had to get it right, and you've just made that problem go away. Working with them, you've solved something that was a really big headache for them, and then they're really on board. And that's why I like being an implementer, is because you're at the coalface and that big beaming smile you get from the client is like, "Thank you, John. That has made my life so much easier." And then it's easier to push through projects that are higher risk or more difficult or with longer lead times, because they've then got that example of when you delivered some value to them. But with software projects, we deliver very regularly. We're doing it every 2 weeks, 4 weeks. Maybe with IoT projects, because you've got to overcome data silos and dealing with the cloud and on-prem and firewalls and all that. There is a much longer lead time, which is why you have to do a proof of concept before they can start believing in what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that belief is a really important component, because I mentioned earlier that there's a disconnect from KPIs between the operational KPIs, which we use day to day in manufacturing to communicate our performance, and maybe more corporate level KPIs. And we have to bridge that gap. But I think there's also one in terms of that language, in terms of when we're talking about edge and AI and IoT. And it is a world, just by my own demonstration right then, is full of buzzwords. How do we translate that to something that's meaningful? So, when we say reducing let's reduce downtime and it saves us money, that sounds really good, but it doesn't necessarily mean much to a maintenance tech. But if you say, this is how you get your weekend back, this is how you can fix issues before they become problems, what you've attached is a 55% increase in maintenance staff productivity, which is the outcome, to emotional connection, which gets buy-in. And I think that is really, really important in terms of the language we use. What is the cost of downtime? I often use the Big Mac. A Big Mac is what, $5.50 if you're in America, I think. I don't know. I haven't bought. I'm not a great Big Mac eater. So, but could you talk about what does 1 second downtime is? 1 second in a small manufacturing site is 2 Big Macs. That's 1 second is 2 Big Macs worth of cost in the business. In a larger production site, in an automotive plant, that could be up to 115 Big Macs per second. It sounds like a joke, but you're relating meaningless numbers to something that people understand. And I think that's really important between the technology, the management and the implementation of technology, and the end users that have to adopt it and use it and get value from it.
Excellent. Yeah, I agree with you. It's interesting reframing. It's something I quite often share is that it resonated with me when Raj and I were in Germany last week and at an Intel Capital event, and it was interesting to see a shift with investors, VCs, that they weren't interested in applications that talked about cost cutting with AI. What they were interested in was more revenue generation, more business. And I kind of see that reframing spin on that logic, because then it removes the friction of adoption of this type of technology, because then people become less resistant of, oh dear, job's going to be replaced by me, rather than I'm going to be helped as a tool to be optimized to help deliver higher quality, more, therefore, more revenue and sales, right? I I think that drives into like the next question, Dolo, in regards to culture and trust. What cultural shifts are needed to build trust between early adopters of AIoT solutions and teams who are protective of established processes? How do we celebrate both past expertise and future innovation?
Well, I think we've hit on so many common themes, because fundamentally, this isn't a challenge of early adopters of AI and IoT. This is a challenge for any innovator during any technology cycle, basically. So when ERPs first came along and we were essentially automating back office, finance, HR, and other kind of processes, and then we're starting to and that came with its own complications around culture and trust. When the world started moving into the web, and web as a way of serving customers and partners, and then we moved to mobile, and then BI and big data, and now AI. I mean, basically every innovation or every technology shift has created this. So I submit as a kind of piece of my own experiences that this is not necessarily new. So what I'm going to talk about is a little bit of really the fundamentals, which we've all covered basically. So the first part of it, as I said earlier, is this is about people first. So it's people, process, technology, not technology then process, then people. And literally my own career started in deep tech, or for me it was quite deep anyway. I was working on embedded systems, on SCADA systems, and it was very technical, writing firmware, and as far as I was concerned, the technology was just like the key thing here. Otherwise nothing else was possible. And so I had a very technology centric view of what the problem looked like. Anyway, to cut a long story short, the point is technology enables processes, but processes are a way of automating what people want. So if we really take a methodical or a structured view to think about people, and going back to something that Nick touched on, we all want to know, why are we doing this, right? So you have that fundamental series of questions you ask yourself, why, then what should I do about it? So if you understand the why, then what do I do about it? And then I can figure out how, in terms of what technologies or solutions are available for me to assemble. And then the important part is the so what, which is like, so what happened? So that feedback loop is needed as part of essentially any transformation. So that's just the foundations of it, and that's really a methodology that's been around in transformation world for quite a long time. So let's just apply what we all are saying here, which are actually quite reasonably well understood, but sometimes we get carried away by the technology. In this case, I think there is a potential risk that the trust is lost, or the trust needs to be first won. You don't get trust immediately, especially not with something like AI. So some of the things, so now getting specific into the AI and edge in manufacturing, for example, these operators are highly knowledgeable, experienced in their environment, and so throwing a technology at their world, they're going to be skeptics from the start. So you're going to have to win that trust. One of the ways that we've been doing that is building proof of concepts. As we said, let's bring them into an environment. So we're working with a major manufacturer to help them figure out how they can set up a long-running innovation lab. So there's a lot of moving parts in manufacturing, all the way from the physical machinery, which you're going to put sensors gathering data. You're then doing some analytics or AI on that in the edge, but then you're feeding that back end to end, as we said earlier, back into your order processing and your scheduling systems, which are upstream and in the cloud. To get people to understand and trust what they're seeing, give them early access to it, basically. Now, you can't necessarily put all of that into the field. So you're going to have, so you find a different way. So we're looking at helping them create and shape an innovation lab where stakeholders can come in and touch and feel and ask questions and then bring their own ideas to what we could do. So I think that's one way of just kind of making it really visceral and tangible, rather than saying just trust me because I'm a data scientist or I know about technology. It's like let's try it, and we can try it in a safe space such as an innovation lab, and then figure out what a safe way to deploy it is, which is maybe a single site or a couple of sites and scale out. One part in particular with AI is obviously, unlike discrete logic, where you could say, well, I know if the temperature goes above this or if the RPM goes above that, then we need to raise an alarm and do whatever. Here we're saying what we're going to do is understand patterns of data, and then the machine learning will come up with an inference from that training. And you're going to have to put a human in the loop, right in the loop, to gain that level of trust from operational experts. So for example, there are, and I'm going to talk a bit about tech though, but there's different types of AI, right? So a traditional type of AI that we have today is gather the data, large training sets, train models that make inferences in your training environment. Go, okay, that model's good enough now, I'm going to deploy it. And then you run the model in the field. And then as you see something called model drift, which is the model is now using real data, and models are models, so they're not perfect replica of real life. There's some kind of deviation, and then you have to retrain the model. So this is the the ML up cycle, as people call it. Well, what if we try to use AI that works directly with the human in the loop to learn immediately from them? So this is basically in the field supervised learning. So I'm an operator and I know that this AI is directly learning from me. It's one way of doing two things actually. One is trust, but the other one is how do I get into the heuristics of what the operator does? Because not everything that they do is a piece of data. It's behavioral stuff we're trying to capture as well. So AI being this kind of statistical and slightly sci-fi sounding thing, I think we can demystify it through labs and through using different learning mechanisms, if you like, learn directly from the operator. Yeah.
Is that the opportunity to be bringing the operators, the subject matter experts, into the loop of AI and the creation of it? Because then it's in parallel education, but building opportunity that they start to learn that these specific use cases of AI adoption it's not something that has a brain of its own and it's going to take over the world, which is this misconception that people have that actually for these specific use cases it's a specific thing that it knows about and it grows from and it learns from them to then become a tool to work with, not against.
Exactly. You're in control actually as the operator in these scenarios that I'm talking about. The operator is definitely in control because they are telling the machine learning or the AI what is a positive signal or an anomalous signal or whatever. And they can override it at any moment. Now, what happens is over time, you just find yourself less and less having to tell the AI that was wrong and this is the correct outcome in this scenario. And then you start trusting it more. So that's one thing. The other thing about trust, by the way, is AI is so hyped. Okay, so let's be honest. The amount of hype that we see around AI, how much of it is true, how much of it is just science fiction writing, it's hard to decipher. And part of that makes people worried. It's like, what does that mean to it's another thing that I think Nick touched on, which is what does it mean to the maintenance chap in the field or the operator in the field? Am I going to be out of a job? I'm going to train this AI and then what happens to me? Actually, what we found is that basically people have far too much to do already. So this is a way of, again, not using business language, but the idea of cognitive load, right? If I can get this thing to do some of the more autonomous decision making for you that it's taking up your time and you would have always done X, If you get a machine to understand that and do it for you, then you can focus on the bit that a machine can't really do. You can focus on the exceptions, and now you've got brain capacity to do it. And I like what Nick said about, and you get your weekend back, and you're not running around like a headless chicken because so many things have to be attended to. We have some agents, we have some AIs that are doing it.
And is that not the point, though? Is it the point that actually there's a bit of an education step of AI is such a broad term, right?
Yeah.
That we here on this call know that there are so many variations of AI, and I mean the AI has been around for a number of years. I mean, a number of things that people are calling AI are actually still traditional business rules engines, which have been used in manufacturing for a long, long time. But then with the explosion of ChatGPT, getting it into the consumer hand, that's what's been the catalyst for this scale, right? But actually, there are further layers of AI, and for the examples in manufacturing, which are great value of agentic, specific for use cases and so on, that actually the education of understanding what that means for the specific use case, that then it sort of removes that fear factor to help that build that trust, and sort of then help drive that culture with it. I think, being conscious of time and knowing that we've got one last question to have a bit of a chat on, and please do, if you've got any questions, do drop them in the comments, and we'll ask live after this one. So, Raj, practical first steps. What small but meaningful first steps can organizations take to show quick wins with AI and edge computing, helping reduce internal friction and build momentum for larger transformation?
I think I would like to focus on 4 points. I think to avoid friction, I think first thing we have to do is build transparency. Whenever you build applications, so you need to show how AI decisions are made and how it's going to improve the revenue and how it's going to safeguard the operator's job. So it's like you have to prove that you are actually helping them do their job in a safer way, not trying to replace them. And I think this also links to points Dolo was making about trust. So if you have good transparency and explainability, then the trust will come up. Also, pick a low risk, high impact use case. For example, build a digital twin of a simple machine in your manufacturing workflow and show to the operator that how this digital twin can help them avoid the downtimes of that machine, and then they'll start appreciating it. They show them that they don't have to manually inspect the health of the machine every day. The AI is doing that for you, and they can focus on the actual work. So start small and then scale gradually, as Paul we have been talking about, right? So build a small proof of concept of single machine, and then you can scale across the whole manufacturing workflow or supply chain, but step by step. Also make sure that you co-create pilots with the operators, the people who work on the floor, and also you get those people on the floor to define the KPIs, as mentioned by Nick and others, and get them to test the AI solution and get their score on whether KPI was achieved successfully or not. This is very important. Otherwise, sometimes what happens in IT world is that we build solutions without considering the practical usefulness or practical adoption. I think the other point I would like to say is visualize and broadly advertise the quick wins across the whole company, whole manufacturing supply chain, so that more people get curious about this kind of AI and edge computing technologies, and they come forward for adoption. And obviously, always whenever you have a technological success, just don't praise the AI scientists, but also praise the domain scientists like operators, who actually provided the key input, like how to train the model, from where to collect the data, where to deploy it. Because even if I'm an AI engineer and Paul, we are developing software together with John, we don't know where to deploy the model on the machine, right? This is something operator knows, right? So that appreciation and that inclusiveness is one of the key steps in adoption of this kind of technology. So I think these are the points I wanted to make. Thank you.
No, that's brilliant. I think that really resonates on sort of how to sort of dissipate the ego by making it a team thing rather than a personal thing, right? And showing the contribution that everybody makes in regards to the collaborative success. Nick, thoughts on that?
Well, actually, that was the one thing I'd written that nobody'd mentioned until Raj mentioned it, and John mentioned it in passing, which is we really do. We're very negative, and even on this call, we're kind of talking about the challenges. We need to celebrate the wins, though, as well, and publicize them. And, if you celebrate the wins, then everybody who's been part of that journey gets the recognition and the feel-good factor. But, as Dolo mentioned earlier on, manufacturing is a very lean business. So if another factory in the network is doing something better than you want to know about it, and you want to see if you can do it as well to improve your own numbers. So that part of that culture is about using the competition and the behaviors within the manufacturing environment to actually drive adoption and scale. I think so. I think they're my points. So we just need to celebrate more about what works. Let Gartner and everybody else talk about 95% of the projects failing or not adding any value. Let's celebrate those 5%, because those 5% really do make a difference.
No, I think that's absolutely brilliant. And in fact, I'm going to chastise you for not raising that when we were planning this show, that we should have done it on a positive spin rather than a negative spin. It's your fault, Nick. Only joking, I'll take accountability on that one. But I think you're absolutely right. I think, especially like from the evolution of IoT Edge in regards to how I've worked my way through into this point now, is that it's been the hype and then, falling into the chasm. The few have got across that chasm. That actually, I think you're right. Maybe what we should be doing is celebrating the successes, celebrating the ones that have succeeded, and making and giving that confidence to the market that it does work and it can work and it does demonstrate those values. I think that's a super strong point. And in fact, Raj, tomorrow's presentation has just now got a new spin on it from me tomorrow. Dolo, your thoughts on that and in regards to...
I absolutely reinforce what Nick said about celebrating the successes. But going back to Raj's points about, start small, you need to be able to take bite-sized chunks and then, and prove some value and then go from there, which for me is about the roadmap, right? So if we need to take small steps, but they need to be for a purpose, right? So going back all the way to the beginning when we said, we need to have a shared vision, get all the stakeholders, all the folks involved to say, why are we doing this? This is what we're trying to achieve. Now, if you're trying to achieve something big and ambitious, you don't say, and we're going to go from here to there, and that's the project. It's going to be a series of projects, a series of steps. But now you have a purpose in mind. You're mapping out that roadmap, which shows them what those steps look like, and accepting that we're going to learn from this, or we're going to need to pivot, and then the second part is that the really regular comms. So this is a journey of the old adage about the journey of 1,000 miles starting with a single step, but each step keeping stakeholders up to date with what's happened, not the ones in the projects, just more broadly within your organization, and celebrating. Absolutely. That the comms on any transformation, I think, is it's a hugely important part to embed into the way you do things.
Yeah, I think, I sometimes sort of bring up the point of how the market gets overinflated with that hype scale curve with the likes of some of the brands that was mentioned early on who create those reports. I'm not going to mention their names again because and that's another thing. But what we don't do is celebrate the successes. It's quite often then gets to the point of falling through into the chasm that they start to sort of deflate that scale and opportunity, which then drives the investment in another direction. With AI at the moment, every C-level is pushing we need to be adopting AI without really understanding what AI is with it. Sadly, this evening we are running out of time. We are tight on the clock, and we did have a couple of questions to come through, which I will respond privately to those questions. Fortunately, I can answer them. Thank you very much to the panel for joining and having this roundtable. We have a show lined up which we'll be announcing for November, with some announcements coming through from with the National AioT Hub, who is, of course, our sponsor, and thank you very much to Raj and the team for that. John, we have December lined up with...
No, we've got January and February tentative, and I still need someone from November. So if anyone has an idea for talk, please get in contact.
I've got November sorted. We just need something for December then.
Okay, December then.
So anybody who would like to join a show, please do drop us a line. I am through the website, and we'd more than happy to have a chat and look to bring you on. Nick, Ben, Dolo, Rajiv, John, of course, thank you very much for your time this evening. It's always a pleasure, and I've really enjoyed that conversation with you all, and look forward to doing it again soon. And on that note, thank you very much, and good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.